Bloodweave Detectives, Book 2, The Case of the Clockwork Conspiracy. Prologue, The Automaton's Last Words. The first murder wasn't a person at all, at least that's what the watch said. By the time Vesta found them, the district was sealed off, and the rain was coming down in sheets so fine it blurred the line between weave and weather. A metal man lay crumpled in the street, brass ribs torn open, smoke coiling from the gaps like a dying breath. Its eyes, glass and copper, still flickered. Words escaped its vocal modulator in stuttering fragments. He promised us freedom. Then the light went out. Vesta had barely time to whisper a blessing when the echo came, a low hum that made the cobblestones tremble. She knew that sound. It wasn't thunder, it was magic bound in metal. Chapter 1. An invention of murder. Before you ask, Vesta said, wringing rain from her coat. Yes, it was technically dead. And no, I didn't play it a funeral dirge. Gale looked up from his desk, eyes alight with that dangerous curiosity that always made Astarion sigh. A dead automaton, you say? Not dismantled, not deactivated, dead. Exactly that, Vesta replied, and it spoke. Astarion groaned from his seat by the fire where he was polishing his cane, silver-headed, ornamental, and entirely unnecessary. Lovely. First singing sigils, now grieving furniture. We really are diversifying. It wasn't furniture, Gale said absently, already reaching for his notebook. The Artificers Guild reported thefts of ether cores last month. This could be connected. Vesta raised a brow. And by connected, you mean you're about to drag us through another sleepless night of illegal spell reconstruction? He smiled faintly. If the clues demand it. Astarion rose, coat whispering like silk. And can the clues demand we not get arrested this time? Gale glanced up at him, the corner of his mouth twitching. Then we'll have to be cleverer than usual, won't we? Their eyes held a moment too long, an unspoken rhythm neither of them had learned how to ignore. Vesta coughed loudly. Flirt on your own time, detectives. We've got a corpse made of cogs waiting. Chapter 2. The Heart Engine Murders. Baldur's Gate never truly slept. Even in the downpour, the lower city glowed like a forge, steam hissing from vents, carriage wheels carving rivers through the cobbles. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled 6. Vesta kept her hood low, loot case strapped tight. You know, she muttered, most respectable investigators don't start their day by breaking into a guild. Then it's fortunate, Astarion replied, that none of us are respectable. Gale's lantern cut a halo through the mist. We're not breaking in. We're entering under academic pretenses. Your last academic pretense set half a library on fire, Vesta said. He ignored her, pausing before the wrought iron gates of the Artificers' Consortium. Even in the rain, the smell of metal and ozone hung thick. Dozens of automata stood silent in the courtyard, sentinels carved from brass and bone. Lovely, Astarion murmured, a whole army of mechanical witnesses. Do try not to insult their craftsmanship. Inside, the air hummed. The main hall was cathedral-sized, lined with forges and work tables. The guild crest, a hammer striking a cog, gleamed above the dais. A woman in oil-stained gloves looked up as they entered. The guild's closed to visitors. Gale flashed a smile that belonged to professors and liars. Then we're fortunate not to be visitors. Gale Decarios, special consult for the city's Arcanum investigations. Her eyes narrowed. The Weaveworker? Heard you were dead. Often mistaken for it, he said lightly. Vesta hid her grin behind her collar. The woman exhaled, defeated. Fine. You'll want the workshop of Master Rin. 3rd level. He's what's left of him. They found Rin slumped over a workbench, half buried in schematics. The smell of burnt copper filled the room. A cracked automaton head lay beside him, eyes dim. Not just sabotage, Gale murmured. This was ritual precision. Astarion leaned close, examining the wounds. Someone removed the heart. Vesta frowned. You mean the power source? No, Gale said quietly. The heart. He pointed to a cavity lined with sigil work, not mechanical but arcane, pulsing faintly in response to his presence. They built these machines with fragments of living essence. The same principle as the weave mirrors. It shouldn't be possible. Astarion straightened, face pale even by his standards. So our murderer isn't dismantling machines. He's harvesting souls. Silence followed, thick as the oil on the floor. Then Vesta said softly, "You called it a heart. There's your title then. The Heart Engine Murders." Gale didn't look up. Fitting, and if my theory's correct, the next victim won't be a machine. Astarion's eyes flicked to him. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Of course not," Gale said too quickly. "Liar," Astarion quipped. They were close again. Too close, the flicker of the forges catching on Gale's hair, the reflection glinting in Astarion's eyes. For a heartbeat, the guild fell away. Only the two of them, the hum of danger and something unsaid sparking in the air. Vesta sighed. "If you two are about to kiss, please wait until we're not standing over a corpse." The moment shattered. Astarion coughed. "She's insufferable." "Accurate," Gale said, stepping back, "but perceptive." Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time. Vesta tightened her coat. "So what now, detective?" Gale glanced toward the city skyline, where the foundries glowed like stars. "Now we find out who's building hearts that can die." Chapter 3: Echoes of the Gondians. The rain always sounded different down by the foundries. Up in the upper city, it pattered on clean stone and well-kept roofs. In the lower city, it ran in gutters and over warped planks. But here, in the district where Baldur's gate had once let the Gondians dream in brass and fire, the rain hit rusted chimneys and hollow pipes and the empty ribs of dead machines. And it rang. Vesta pulled her cloak tighter. "This is the part of town where good ideas come to die." Astarion regarded the looming building in front of them, a wide brick and iron structure with its windows boarded and its sign half torn away. You could still read the name if you knew what it used to say. Gondian Mechanical and Ether Works, established regrettably before Gortash. "Ah," Astarion said, "trauma with signage." Gale held up his lantern and the rain lit up around them. "This used to be one of their main workshops," he said, "before the Steel Watch, before they were repurposed." Vesta glanced at him. "You mean enslaved?" "Yes," Gale said quietly. "That." They slipped inside through a side door whose lock had already been picked, recently, and not by Astarion. The air inside was warm and metallic, full of the smell of oil, damp and old magic. Gears lay in piles, disassembled frames of automata were propped against the walls like suits of armor that had forgotten how to stand. Somewhere deeper in the building, something hummed. Astarion tensed. "Someone's still working." "Good," Gale murmured. "Then we can ask them why they're rebuilding outlawed Magitech constructs in an abandoned foundry." "Gently," Vesta said. "Ex-Gondians don't have a lot of patience left for authority." Gale arched a brow. "Do we look like authority?" Astarion gestured at him. "You do. Robes, staff, air of academic righteousness." Vesta pointed at Astarion. "You don't. You look like a problem." "I prefer solution," Astarion said. They followed the hum. The back chamber was half machine, half shrine. Brass arms hung from the ceiling. A wide circle was etched on the floor, not sigils of war, but of restoration, delicate, repeated runes designed to rebind rather than control. And at the center stood a young woman in a leather apron, sleeves rolled up, goggles pushed into curly hair. She was singing very softly to the inert automaton in front of her. "You were a man once. They didn't ask," she murmured. "I'll get you back. Just hold." She saw them. Her eyes went wide. Her hand flew to a wand on the table. "Don't," Gale said, already lifting his left hand in a non-threatening gesture. "We're not the Watch." "Everyone says that," she snapped, "right before they confiscate 6 months of work." "If we wanted to confiscate it," Astarion said smoothly, "we would have brought people with bigger hats." Vesta stepped forward, palms up. "We're looking into the automaton that died in the lower city. It said someone promised it freedom. We thought..." That sounded very Gondian. That got through. The young woman sagged a little. "Of course it did," she muttered, "because we're the only fools still trying to fix what Gortash did." Gale's eyes sharpened. So you are trying to separate the bonded souls from the constructs? Yes. She gestured at the circle, not to make more, to undo them, to return them to whatever's left of their essence. The city would rather forget the steel watch was made of people. We don't. Astarion's voice was very quiet. You're trying to free the ones still trapped. Yes, she said again, almost angry now. Someone should. Vesta exchanged a quick look with Gale. Then you know someone else is killing your work. At once the girl's face changed, frustration and grief layered together. Rin? Dead, Gale said, chest cavity torn out, same circle work as yours. She cursed softly in Gondian. We thought it was you, Astarion said, or at least we thought the culprit was working from your principles. Her eyes flashed. I would never destroy them. I owe them. We all do. Gale gestured toward the circle. Then who? The girl hesitated just for a second, and that second was all Astarion needed. You're hiding someone, he said. Her jaw clenched. Gale's tone gentled. If someone is trying to free the souls by destroying the vessels, they're not evil. They're just wrong. Let us help. The girl took a breath, then nodded toward the far wall. Downstairs. They descended into the under-foundry, a place of pipes, run-off water, and old cold furnaces. The hum was louder here, not the bright hum of new invention, but the low, angry vibration of an overworked ether core. At the bottom, in the glow of a forge that was not fully lit, sat an older Gondian with a metal brace on one leg. He was holding the head of an automaton like a person holds the hand of a dying friend. You don't have to do this, he was whispering to it. I can break it. I can break the spell. You don't have to serve anymore. Gale stopped at the edge of the light. You're the one killing them. The man didn't look up. I'm freeing them. They don't die free, Gale said softly. They die empty. Now the man looked up, and there was so much guilt in his eyes it crackled like heat. We built them, he said. We let him use our work. We tied souls to metal for him. Do you think I get to sleep after that? Do you think I don't hear them? Astarion's expression flickered, something old and raw. He made you tools. He made us complicit, the man shot back, so now I unmake what I made. Vesta stepped forward slow. You were at the docks, weren't you? When the steel watch fell, the man nodded once. Then you know not all of them wanted to be freed by force, Gale said. Some of them wanted to stay. Some of them didn't know how to be anything but what they were turned into. That's slavery, the man said, when you can't even want to be free. Astarion flinched. Gale heard it, saw it, and his voice shifted very carefully. Maybe, but that doesn't make killing them mercy. The man's eyes burned. What would you have me do, wizard? Leave them trapped, leave them to be scavenged, sold, stripped. I break the shell, the weave snaps back. It goes somewhere, it has to. Has to, Astarion repeated, cold now. That's the kind of thinking that keeps us in cages. The man stared at him. You were bound too. Yes, Astarion said, and if someone had come along and said, you're better off dead than bound, I would have killed him on the spot. You don't understand, the man started to say. No, Astarion snarled, stepping into the light now, eyes red in the forge glow. You don't. It's not your choice to make. You don't get to decide whether someone else's fate is bearable. The room thrummed with tension. Gale put a hand, very gently, on Astarion's arm. I understand about the guilt, Gale said to the man, but he is right about the choice. Vesta slipped between them like warm water. Listen, we're not here to turn you in. We're here to stop this from turning into a citywide panic about Gondian necromancy. You know how fast they'll outlaw the rest of you. The man's shoulders sagged. They already have. Then let us fix this right, Gale said. No more smashed vessels. We stabilize the binding, remove the compulsion, and let what's left decide. The man stared at him, eyes wet. You can do that? Gale drew himself up, that spark of confident lecturer lighting in his eyes. I can try. I have help. Astarion snorted. Occasionally useful, he said, but the anger was fading from his face, leaving only the ache of recognition. The man swallowed. All right, he whispered. All right, I didn't want to be a murderer. I just... didn't want to hear them anymore. Vesta nodded. That I understand. Above them, thunder rolled, not from the sky this time, but from the street level. Boots. Lots of them. Astarion's head snapped up. We were followed. The girl from upstairs skidded down the steps. The watch is here. And not just watch, council sigils. Brilliant, Astarion said. We can't go anywhere without fanfare. Gale's mind moved fast. Right. Then we are not raiding an illegal Gondian workshop. We are mediating a magical malfunction. Vesta grinned. Oh, I do love headlines. Astarion looked at Gale, voice low. You're going to stand in front of them. Again. Yes, Gale answered. You're still not fully recovered. Astarion protested. I'm aware. Gale agreed. Astarion stepped closer, so close the forge light haloed them both. Try not to get yourself taken in. I'm running out of ways to pretend I don't care. Gale's smile was small and tired, and fond. I'll be very careful then. Vesta glanced between them, shaking her head. You two are going to be the death of my rhythm, she muttered. Then louder, all right, Bloodweave Detectives. Let's see if we can talk our way out of a Gondian scandal. They climbed back toward the foundry floor as the watch pounded on the doors, the old machines watching like silent jury, and somewhere deep in the building, a half-finished automaton murmured in a tiny echoing voice, Don't break me. It whispered, voice faint and trembling, He's still here. The sound froze them all, because the man they'd found hadn't built that one, and if he wasn't the one still making them, or breaking them, then someone else was. And that, more than anything, proved that mercy or madness aside, the heart engine murders were far from finished. Chapter 4. The council's clock, the pounding on the foundry doors became a storm. By order of the council, a voice shouted, Stand down and present yourselves. Vesta raised her hands. Present ourselves? What are we, pastries? Speak for yourself, Astarion muttered. Gale's expression was composed, but the faint shimmer of weave light at his fingertips betrayed the tension underneath. All right, he said quietly. Let me talk first. The doors burst open. The watch flooded in, armored, wet from the rain, led by a woman whose uniform bore the silver gear and hammer crest of the Council's Techno-Magical Oversight Division. Her eyes swept the room, cataloguing everything, the forge, the half-finished automata, the sigil circles still faintly glowing on the floor. Her gaze fixed on Gale. Dekarios. Inspector Van, he said smoothly, always a pleasure. I doubt that. She stepped closer, boots echoing on the iron floor. The council received a report of unauthorized weavework in a restricted facility. Imagine my surprise to find you here. Research collaboration, Gale said without missing a beat. The city requested my consultation regarding residual enchantments left from the steel watch collapse. That so? Van's tone could have sliced steel. And your associates? Vesta bowed slightly. Independent auditors. Astarion added, very independent. The inspector's eyes narrowed. Funny, independent auditors usually bring credentials, not corpses. She gestured toward the covered shape on the floor, the Gondian man who had confessed, now unconscious from shock, watched over by the young apprentice. Gale sighed softly. A tragic accident. But if you'll allow us to explain... No need. Van's hand flicked, and two rune-bound constables stepped forward. You'll be explaining to the council directly. Astarion tensed. Arresting us without cause. Detaining for questioning, she corrected. You can keep your dramatics for the bard. I am the bard, Vesta said sweetly, and I charge extra for dramatics. Van ignored her. Take them. The council chamber smelled of old parchment and ozone, like magic and bureaucracy had been trapped in the same room too long. Gale stood before a semicircle of robed officials and brass-limbed attendants who whispered notes onto levitating scrolls. Vesta and Astarion flanked him like mismatched bodyguards. One relaxed to the point of insolence, the other coiled and dangerous. Councillor Mirren, an older elf with eyes the color of copper, adjusted her spectacles. Master Dekarios, you were previously removed from our registry for explosive academic conduct. Now you trespass in a sealed industrial zone. Care to explain? Explosive, Gale repeated mildly. A dramatic exaggeration. The ceiling was entirely reparable. Astarion coughed into his hand to hide a smile. Vesta stepped forward. "If I may, Counselor." He wasn't experimenting. "We were investigating a pattern of murders linked to stolen Gondian tech. A threat to the city." The murmurs rippled through the chamber. One official leaned forward. "Murders?" "Automata," Gale clarified, each one containing echoes of bound souls from the Steel Watch program. "We've found evidence that someone is targeting them, and the artificers who built them." Another counselor frowned. "Impossible. The Steel Watch was destroyed years ago." "Tell that," Vesta said quietly, "to the one that begged not to be broken." Silence fell. Inspector Van's face twitched, the first hint of doubt. "You're claiming reactivation." "Residual weave resonance," Gale said. "But if it continues, the city may find its past mistakes walking its streets again." Councillor Mirren steepled her fingers. "And who, in your expert opinion, would want that?" Gale hesitated. "Someone who profits from fear. Or from memory. Perhaps someone who never wanted the Gondians absolved." Astarion caught the flicker of understanding in Myron's eyes before she hid it. The gears behind the council were already turning. They were released hours later, technically unharmed, though Vesta claimed the questioning had aged her at least a decade. The sun was rising by the time they stepped back onto the damp streets of the low city. "Well," Astarion said, stretching, "that was a spectacular waste of charm." "On the contrary," Gale murmured, "they believed us." Vesta gave him a look. "They believed something." He nodded. "Enough to stay quiet, for now." Astarion frowned. "Which means someone on that council knows exactly what's happening, and wants it kept buried." "Which means," Vesta added, "that our little automaton killer might just be working for them." Gale looked back at the council tower, its brass dome gleaming in the morning light. "Or worse," he said softly, "they might be building more." Astarion tilted his head, studying him. "You have that tone again." "What tone?" Gale said innocently. "The 'I'm about to drag us into another catastrophe' tone." Astarion snorted. Gale smiled faintly. "You have that look again." "What look?" Astarion said. "The one that means you'll follow me anyway." Gale grinned sheepishly. Astarion smirked. "Don't flatter yourself." "Wouldn't dream of it," Gale added, still grinning. Vesta sighed. "You two are exhausting." Gale turned toward the skyline. "Come on, if we want to stop another war machine from being born, we'll need to start where the last one died." "The Foundry District again?" Vesta asked. "No," Gale said, "the Forge of Invention. The Grand Gondian Clock Tower." Vesta groaned. "Wonderful." Another climb. Astarion's grin flashed, sharp and amused. "Don't worry, darling. I'll catch you if you fall." Vesta rolled her eyes. "Try not to get distracted if he does." Gale was already walking ahead, lantern in hand, the city waking around them, all steam and shadow and secrets. Chapter 5. The Grand Clock Tower, the Grand Gondian Clock Tower, stood like a blade against the dawn. Once a marvel of craft and timekeeping, it now loomed over the harbour like an accusation. Half-collapsed gears jutting through the stone, its highest bells forever frozen at midnight. The council had shuttered it after the fall of the Steel Watch, but everyone knew the lower chambers still pulsed with forbidden power. Vesta's boots scraped on the narrow spiral stair as they climbed. "You realize this entire tower is an elaborate death trap?" Gale answered without looking back. "Only if we're unlucky." Astarion's laugh was quiet. "We're always unlucky." They emerged into a massive chamber filled with sunlight refracted through broken stained glass. Hundreds of gears turned above them, some real, some woven illusions. At the center stood a man at a workbench, surrounded by half-assembled constructs. Smaller than the Steel Watch, more intricate, their hearts glowing blue instead of red. He turned when he heard them. Grey skin, soot-streaked hands, eyes still too sharp for his age. It was Wulbren Bongal. Vesta's breath caught. "Oh hells." He grinned wide and toothy. "Well, if it isn't the city's pet detective and his decorative entourage." Astarion arched a brow. "Flattery will get you nowhere." "Didn't plan on it," Wulbren said, "though I did plan on the watch sniffing around eventually. Should have known you'd be the ones they'd send." Gale's voice was steady but cold. "We didn't come from the council. We came because people are dying." Wulbren spread his hands. "People, or machines that pretend to be. Make up your mind, wizard." "The difference matters," Gale said. "Not to me." He gestured at the glowing constructs. "The Gondians built the steel watch and helped Gortash enslave a city. Barkus and his little loyalists called themselves heroes for surviving it. I lost everything while they rebuilt, so now I rebuild better." Vesta stepped forward. "By making more. By taking back what they stole." His fist struck the work table. Sparks leapt. "These are mine. Iron Hand design, Iron Hand vengeance. I've reclaimed their heart engines and taught them who their masters really were." Astarion's eyes narrowed. "You're not saving anyone. You're binding them again." "They were already bound," Wulbren roared. "At least this time they remember who hurt them." The nearest automaton turned its head. The blue glow in its eyes flickered like thought. Vesta felt the weave shiver. Gale's tone softened. "You've reawakened them with memory, not mercy. That will destroy them." "Better to burn than rust," Wulbren muttered. "Better to fight than be forgotten." Astarion moved before Gale could stop him, blade flashing, catching the light of the gears. "He's going to start another massacre." "Wait," Vesta's voice cracked through the chamber like a bell. "Look, he's not controlling them." The automatons had turned toward Wulbren, all 6 of them, their hearts beating in perfect synchrony. Wulbren looked up, and for the first time he seemed afraid. "They're remembering," he whispered. "They were supposed to obey, not remember." The gears above them began to spin faster. The whole tower trembled. Gale's eyes widened. He tied the memory loop into the timekeeping mechanism. "When the clock completes its cycle." "Boom?" Vesta asked. "Something like that," muttered Gale. Astarion cursed. "Lovely. Another explosion tied to one of your ex-colleagues' projects." "Not mine," Gale snapped. "Hold them off. I'll sever the weave link." The automatons lurched forward, motion jerky like they were fighting their own limbs. Wulbren shouted at them, but they didn't stop. Vesta drew her dagger. "So, just another morning then?" Astarion smirked, spinning his cane sword. "Try to keep up, darling." When it was over, when the last of the gear souls went still and the great clock above them slowed to a halt, Wulbren lay against the railing, breathing hard, eyes wide with horror. "They remembered," he said again, weakly. "They knew me." "They forgave you," Gale said quietly. "That's why they stopped." Astarion sheathed his blade. "Forgiveness? How quaint." Vesta knelt beside Wulbren. "You wanted justice. You got ghosts." He let out a shaky laugh. "Maybe that's all that's left for any of us." The tower's bells gave one slow, shuddering toll. Far below, the city stirred, unaware that time itself had almost torn. Gale looked out over Baldur's gate, the sunrise bleeding through the fog. "Someone funded him," he said. "He couldn't have done this alone." Astarion stepped beside him. "Council money?" "Or something older," Gale murmured. "Something that still believes in the perfect marriage of metal and soul." Vesta rose, brushing dust from her coat. "Then I guess we're not done, boys. We've just wound the clock back to the start." Chapter 6. A matter of silence. They didn't see daylight again until afternoon. By then, the clock tower was crawling with watch and council auditors, all of them talking at once, every voice trying to pin the blame on someone else. The official report would later describe the incident as a spontaneous failure of unstable Gondian machinery. That was the council's favorite word for guilt, spontaneous. Vesta stood on the edge of the cordon, arms folded, watching Wulbren being loaded into a prison carriage. He didn't fight. He just stared up at the tower, lips moving soundlessly. "Are they going to hang him?" she asked. "Publicly?" Gale shook his head. "Too political. Privately? Possibly." "Of course," Astarion said, "wouldn't want the city thinking the Great Council lets its pet projects murder people in their sleep." Gale gave him a sidelong look. "You sound almost disappointed." "I'm many things," Astarion said. "Disappointed is usually the least of them." The council representatives conferred by the carriage, Inspector Van among them, pale and furious. When she finally turned to them, her tone was like a blade honed too thin. You will give no public statement, she said. Do you understand me? Perfectly, Gale replied. Vesta's voice was mild. Define public. Don't push me, Bard, Inspector Van sneered. Oh, but I'm a natural at it. Vesta sneered back. Van's composure cracked just long enough for a flash of frustration. This entire investigation is classified. The Council appreciates your assistance. But if another word leaks, Van started. We'll be struck from the record, Gale offered. Wouldn't be the first time. Van's mouth tightened. You think this is a game, Dekarios? But if I were you, I'd be very careful who you accuse next. And with that, she turned and walked away, her boots ringing like hammers against stone. The rain started again that night. The bell above the bookshop door had long since stopped ringing. Most of the lower city was asleep, but the faint golden light spilling from Dekarios and company, arcane texts and curiosities made the fog outside look almost kind. Gale sat at his desk upstairs, surrounded by towers of books, scrolls and teacups in various stages of abandonment. The repaired lantern from the foundry glowed beside him, steady, warm, and maybe a little too bright for comfort. Astarion stood at the window, looking down at the wet cobblestones below. The reflection of the lantern painted pale fire across his face. She's right, you know, he said finally. You do treat this like a game. Gale didn't look up. Would you prefer I treat it like despair? I'd prefer you treat it like danger, Astarion pleaded. I do. I simply happen to find it fascinating, Gale retorted. Fascinating, Astarion sighed. You nearly died in that tower. Nearly, Gale said, but not entirely. Astarion's jaw flexed. That's not clever, it's avoidance. Gale sighed, setting down the lantern cloth. If I didn't intellectualize it, I'd never leave this room again. That silenced them both for a while. The only sound was the city breathing through the rain. Vesta had gone out, something about needing atmosphere for a new song, the kind that didn't require listening to two men fail at emotional intimacy for an hour. Astarion finally said, You believe what he said, don't you? That the automatons forgave him. Gale's eyes lifted to the glass flame of the lantern. I think forgiveness is the last defense of the dying. The weave bends toward mercy when nothing else remains. Astarion laughed softly. That's beautiful. And utterly wrong. Gale smiled faintly. Then tell me the right version. Astarion turned from the window, eyes catching the lamplight. Forgiveness isn't mercy. It's surrender. The moment you stop fighting the thing that hurt you. You make that sound like a crime, Gale commented. It feels like one. Astarion answered. For a heartbeat they were close again, the air between them heavy with what they still refused to name. Gale's voice dropped, quiet as a prayer. You think I surrender easily? Astarion's answer was barely more than a breath. I think you're still deciding who to surrender to. The lantern flickered. Neither of them moved. Then the door creaked, Vesta returning, hair soaked, cheeks flushed from the rain. She took one look at them and groaned. Oh gods, again? If you're going to hover at each other like badly written romance poetry, at least have the decency to kiss or kill each other. I've got lyrics to finish. Astarion stepped back with an amused sigh. See? The voice of reason. Gale cleared his throat, turning briskly back to the lantern. Yes, quite. Vesta dropped her loot case onto the table. So what's next, detectives? As she poured some brandy into 3 glasses to knock out the chill and handed them to the 2 men wordlessly. Gale glanced toward the dark window where the city lights blurred in the rain. We wait. The council will hide the evidence, but something this large doesn't vanish. The heart engine is still out there somewhere. And when it resurfaces? Vesta questioned. Gale met Astarion's eyes. We'll be ready. Astarion's smile was small and sharp, or at least entertaining. Vesta raised her glass. To both. They clinked their glasses in the dim light, 3 silhouettes against the fog. Detectives, fools, and perhaps something almost like a family. Outside, the city clock tower struck midnight, and somewhere beneath the streets, a faint metallic heartbeat began to tick again. Chapter 7. The house that books built. Morning came to the lower city as it always did. with fog thick as soup and the smell of the river working its way into everything. The sign above Decarios and Company, arcane texts and curiosities, creaked softly in the breeze, its gilding long since dulled by salt and soot. Inside, the bookshop glowed like a pocket of calm, golden lamplight, drifting dust motes, the faint scratch of quills and the rustle of pages that hadn't been touched in decades. Vesta sat cross-legged on the counter, plucking absently at her lute while a pot of tea steamed beside her. "You know," she said, "for a man who claims not to live here, Astarion certainly sheds like a cat." "I do not shed," came the indignant voice from upstairs. "You kind of do," Gale said mildly as he descended the steps, holding a bundle of Astarion's silk shirts. 3 of these were draped over the armillary sphere. Again. Astarion appeared at the top landing, perfectly put together, except for the faint smear of ink on his collar. It needed somewhere to air dry. "You wouldn't understand. Your wardrobe is all tweed and tragedy." Vesta grinned. "You two sound like an old married couple fighting over laundry." Gale froze mid-step. "We are not." Astarion's smirk widened. "Careful. You'll spill tea on my—" "Your armillary sphere. Yes, I've heard," Vesta remarked. "On my ego, darling. Much harder to clean Astarion finished." Vesta groaned, flopping backward onto the counter. "If I had known renting a room here came with a nightly performance of domestic denial, I would have asked for a discount." "Renting?" Gale arched an eyebrow. "I haven't charged you a single coin." "Exactly," she said, sitting up with a grin, "which means I'm officially your most profitable tenant." He opened his mouth to argue, thought better of it, and sighed. "You're all impossible." "Ah," Astarion said, descending to steal a piece of toast from the plate on the counter. "But admit it, wizard, you'd miss us." Gale pretended to tidy a stack of journals. "I would certainly notice the silence." "Which is almost affection," Vesta said. "Write it down. I think he's evolving." Later, when the shop grew quiet again, customers gone, kettle whistling, Vesta found Gale alone in the upstairs study, staring absently at the city beyond the window. Below, she could hear Astarion humming to himself while reorganizing the scrolls he'd scattered earlier, as if trying to make himself useful. Vesta leaned in the doorway. "You know, you could just ask him to move in." Gale didn't turn. "That would imply something." "It would imply you already live the way you're pretending not to," she said. "You both haunt this place like you've been cursed to share it until one of you confesses feelings and the other bursts into flames." "That's oddly specific," Gale noted. "Bardic instinct," Vesta replied. He smiled faintly. "He has a perfectly good apartment in the upper city." "Which he visits," she said, "whenever he needs to remind himself he's not domesticated. Which, by the way, is every 3rd Tuesday. Gale finally looked at her. "You've been counting?" "Of course. Someone has to keep track of your emotional calendar." Below them, Astarion called up, "If you're whispering about me, make it flattering." Vesta smirked. "You're hopeless." "So I've been told," Astarion shouted back. She moved toward the stairs, pausing to glance back. "For what it's worth, Gale, I think he already lives here. He just hasn't unpacked yet." When she was gone, Gale stood in the glow of the desk lamp, looking at the second cup of tea cooling beside his own. Then, very quietly, he smiled. Chapter 8. Ash and Amber. After Vesta had gone to her room and Astarion had slipped into the night, Gale stayed awake in the lamplight. He half grimaced when he glanced at the calendar. 2 teacups sat cooling on his desk, his and Astarion's, and for a long while he simply looked at them. There was something absurdly comforting about their presence, a physical proof that he wasn't alone. He used to despise that kind of comfort. In Waterdeep, solitude had been his penance and his refuge. He'd sealed himself away in that tower above the harbour, the walls lined with books and regrets. The only sound had been the low, hungry pulse of the orb in his chest, a ticking curse of his own making, whispering its constant demand for more magic, more power, more him. Only Tara, his Tressim companion, ever dared to visit. Sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, she'd perch on his desk and drop stolen trinkets before him. Minor enchantments, baubles of barely contained power. "For you, old friend," she'd say, just enough to keep your heart from detonating all over my favorite wizard robes." He smiled faintly at the memory. It wasn't the explosion he'd feared most. It was the implosion, the slow collapse of self that came with isolation and hunger and shame. When Mistra had finally lifted the orb's curse, mending the weave of his soul where his arrogance had torn it, he had thought he would return to Waterdeep, back to the towers, the archives, the comfort of the known. He told himself he didn't because Baldur's Gate needed him, that the lower city was a better place for his talents, for quiet research, for redemption. But sitting now in the glow of his cluttered bookshop, the sound of Vesta's humming drifting faintly from her little room, he knew that wasn't the truth. He stayed because Astarion stayed. The vampire had insisted it was only for convenience. The lighting is better here, and your tea is tolerable. Yet somehow his boots lived by the door, his combs migrated to the washstand, and his laughter haunted the staircase. Gale picked up Astarion's abandoned teacup, turning it in his hands. A faint trace of red stained the rim, wine or blood or both. He smiled despite himself. He'd had stars in Waterdeep. He'd had silence, brilliance, the favor of gods. But he'd never had this. He ran a hand through his hair and murmured into the quiet, "Careful, Dekarios. You're growing comfortable again." Outside, the rain whispered against the windows, mingling with the steady metallic rhythm beneath the city, that strange, soft heartbeat echoing from somewhere below the streets. For a moment, he thought it was his imagination. Then he realized it wasn't. He reached for his quill and jotted a single note in his journal. "The weave hums differently tonight, like something old remembering how to breathe." Chapter 9. Silver and smoke. The upper city slept differently than the lower one. Down there, the streets dreamed in noise and fog. Up here, silence had a price tag. Astarion's apartment was beautiful. Marble hearth, velvet drapes, polished mirrors he could not see himself in. The kind of place he used to imagine living in when he was still a creature of shadows, pressed against alley walls waiting for Cazador's whistle. He'd thought that when freedom came, he'd want luxury, and for a while he had. Silk sheets, wine cellars, rooms that locked from the inside. Now they only felt like echoes. He stood before the unlit hearth, a book in hand that he hadn't turned a page of in an hour. The firewood was stacked perfectly, waiting. He could have lit it with a thought, but it would have only reminded him that the warmth wasn't real. He told himself he stayed here because he could, because it was his, and that mattered. But most nights he found himself at Gale's bookshop instead, wrapped in the scent of tea and dust and weave light, arguing about sigils or philosophy until the candles burned low. Freedom, he thought, had a strange sense of gravity. He'd promised himself, the night Cazador's ashes scattered into the wind, that he would never bow to anyone again. Not to power, not to gods, not even to love. And yet, whenever Gale looked at him, really looked with that patient, unbearable tenderness, Astarion felt something inside him kneel of its own accord. It wasn't submission. It wasn't even weakness. It was recognition. He ran a hand through his hair, restless. "Foolish," he muttered. "You finally escape one master and immediately start pining after a wizard with more books than sense." The empty room didn't answer. He poured himself a glass of wine, the good kind, imported from Amn, and tried to taste it the way he used to. But it was too sweet, too still. Down in the lower city, he could imagine Gale still awake, hunched over his desk, with his hair falling into his eyes, muttering equations to himself while Vesta hummed through the floorboards. The sound had started to mean safety to him. He leaned on the windowsill, looking out over the glittering rooftops. From here, the bookshop was just a glow in the fog, a pulse of light near the river. He could have gone there, he almost did. But he didn't want to risk the silence that might follow if he said too much. Because if Gale ever pulled away, if that warmth ever dimmed, Astarion wasn't sure he'd survive losing that too. He lifted the glass in a sardonic toast to the night. "To freedom," he said softly, "and all the little chains we forge ourselves." The clock tower in the distance chimed the hour, a low metallic heartbeat echoing over the city. Astarion smiled without humor. Oh, wonderful! More ominous foreshadowing. He set the glass aside and reached for his coat. If he couldn't sleep, he might as well haunt the bookshop again. Chapter 10. What the heart forgets. The rain had thinned to mist by the time Astarion reached the shop. The lanterns along the dockside streets had burned low, halos of gold blurring in the fog. He stood outside Dekarios and company. Arcane texts and curiosities for a moment, listening. The faint hum of weave light glowed through the upstairs windows. Of course, Gale was still awake. Astarion smiled to himself, small, fond, exasperated. He rapped once on the door, more out of habit than courtesy, then let himself in. The bell above the frame chimed softly. The shop smelled of rain and parchment, of dust and candle oil. A small fire crackled in the hearth. Gale had clearly tried to stay awake and failed, until the sound of the bell stirred him. He looked up from behind a pile of books, eyes bleary but alert. "You're here early." "It's nearly dawn," Astarion said. "Technically, I'm late." Gale smiled, that gentle, weary curve of his mouth. "Couldn't sleep." "Could you?" Astarion smirked. "Point taken," Gale conceded. For a while they didn't speak. Astarion hung his coat by the door, wandered toward the desk, ran a hand along the spines of books he'd pretended to read half a dozen times. The silence between them felt heavier than words. Finally, Gale said quietly, "You don't have to keep pretending this is temporary." Astarion stilled. "I beg your pardon." "The coming and going," Gale said, voice even but soft. "You always act as though you're visiting. But most of your things are here. Your cane by the door, your books mixed with mine. The extra pillow I keep pretending is decorative." Astarion's mouth twitched. "Are you accusing me of cohabitation?" "I'm suggesting," Gale said carefully, "that you already live here. You simply refuse to admit it." Astarion's laugh was light, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. "And you want me to admit it? How very domestic of you." "That's not what Gale began. But it was, and they both knew it. He took a step closer, meaning to make it sound casual, but the air between them tightened. "You're always here, Astarion? When you leave, I start counting the hours until you return." The humor drained from Astarion's face. "Careful, wizard. You're starting to sound like someone who cares," Gale finished softly. "I do." The words hung there, bright and terrifying. Astarion looked away, jaw tense. "You shouldn't." "Why not?" "Because caring turns to need, and need turns to leash. I've worn too many of those," Astarion murmured softly. Gale's voice lowered, gentler than the rain outside. "I'm not your master." "No," Astarion whispered, "but you could be the one I'd kneel to willingly, and that's worse." Gale's breath caught. For a long, terrible moment, they just stood there, shadows flickering between them. Then the bell above the door rang. Both flinched, too sharp, too human. Vesta's voice called from the stairwell. "I swear, if this is another one of you two's emotional marathons, I'm—" She stopped short when she saw the silhouette in the doorway. A man stood there, soaked to the bone, uniform torn and spattered with soot. A watch sergeant, breathing hard. "Apologies," he said between gasps. "You're the Bloodweave Detectives, yes? You're needed, now." Gale straightened instantly. "What's happened?" The sergeant swallowed. "Another body, found near the Undercity, same sigils as before. But this one's still moving." The room went silent. Astarion's expression hardened. "Moving how?" "Like it's trying to speak," the sergeant said. "But its chest is full of gears." Gale reached for his coat. "Show us." Astarion hesitated just long enough to glance back at him. Their eyes met, too much unsaid between them, now forced back into the language they understood best. Investigation, danger, distraction. Vesta sighed, already strapping on her loot case. Romance postponed. Murder first. Priorities, boys. They followed the sergeant into the fading dawn, boots splashing through puddles, the mist swallowing them whole. Behind them, the bookshop light flickered once and went out. Chapter 11. The living machine. The Undercity was older than the city above it. Even before Baldur's Gate had names for its alleys, these tunnels had been here, a tangle of smugglers' routes, ancient sewers, and forgotten crypts that the city kept trying to bury. The air was damp and heavy, thick with mildew and the iron smell of old blood. Vesta's boots splashed softly through the muck. "You know," she whispered, "we should really start charging the watch extra for every subterranean nightmare they drag us into." Astarion's voice was dry. "You're assuming we'll make it out to invoice them." Gale said nothing. His focus was ahead, where the sergeant's lantern cast jagged shadows over stone walls scrawled with half-faded runes. They reached a wide chamber where the ceiling arched like the inside of a ribcage. Broken crates and wine barrels were strewn about, and in the center, surrounded by a loose circle of watchmen, lay the body. It wasn't quite human, a man's shape, but the chest cavity was split open, filled with brass gears and dark tubing. The veins in the exposed arms shimmered faintly with alchemical silver, and where the heart should have been, something beat. It pulsed like a heart. It ticked like a clock. One of the watchmen flinched as it moved. It tried to talk, he stammered. Said something about the weave. Gale crouched beside the corpse, his expression unreadable. The heart engine ticked steadily, blue light flickering through the chest cavity. "It's alive," he murmured, "or rather, it's remembering how to be." Vesta knelt beside him, wrinkling her nose. "It looks like the ones from the foundry, only worse." "Not worse," Gale said. "Evolved." Astarion folded his arms, watching the blue glow reflect off Gale's face. "Careful, dear. You sound almost admiring." "I'm terrified," Gale said softly, "and that's always the first step toward understanding." The heart clicked again, the head twitched toward Gale, and then, through cracked lips and the faint whine of gears, it spoke. "Dekarios." Gale froze. Astarion's hand went to his sword. "It knows you." "You left the door open," the voice rasped, metallic and wrong. "It came through the weave and learned the pattern of your pulse." The light in its chest flared, a blinding blue. Gale stumbled back, covering his eyes. When the light dimmed, the body was still again. The ticking had stopped. Silence flooded the chamber. Vesta exhaled shakily. "That's new." Gale stood, his hands trembling. "It shouldn't know me. It shouldn't know anything." "Maybe it's learning faster than you think," Astarion said. His tone was half warning, half admiration. The sergeant cleared his throat nervously. "What? What do we do with it?" "Burn it," Vesta said instantly. "No," Gale murmured. "Not yet. We need to study it before it reawakens." Astarion stared at him. "Study it?" "Gale, it talked. In first-name basis, no less." "That's precisely why." Gale turned toward the watchman. "Seal off this chamber. No one touches it until I've set up wards." The sergeant hesitated. "You'll take responsibility for it?" Gale met his eyes. "I already have." Later, when the others dispersed to fetch supplies, Vesta cornered him by the stairway. "You're shaking," she said softly. "I'm fine." Gale lied. "You're lying." Vesta acknowledged. He didn't deny it. "It said it knew my pulse. That's not just recognition, that's connection." "Which means," Vesta questioned, "someone, or something, used my weave signature to anchor the heart engine's core. That's how it's binding souls." "Through magic I once wrote," Gale answered. Vesta swore under her breath. "You mean this whole mess is your spell work?" "Twisted, corrupted, repurposed. Yes," he said. Astarion appeared at the top of the stairs, pale and still. "So you didn't just invent the problem," he said coolly. "You're the blueprint." Gale winced. "Apparently." "Wonderful," Astarion said. "Now the abominations are stalking us by scent." "By resonance," Gale corrected automatically. "Same thing when you're the one they want." Astarion retorted. Vesta looked between them. "All right. Enough guilt and melodrama for one night. We go back, regroup, drink something strong, and figure out who's stealing your magic before the entire city starts ticking." Astarion muttered, "The bard has a point." Gale sighed, rubbing his temples. "She usually does." "Usually?" Vesta grinned. "Darling, that's practically a compliment." They left the Undercity together, boots echoing in the wet stone hall. Behind them, the thing on the floor twitched once, just once, as if listening. Then, very faintly, it began to hum a tune. Vesta's tune. Chapter 12. A dangerous pulse. By the time they reached the shop again, dawn had already melted into grey daylight. The lower city streets gleamed wet and empty, the fog curling around lampposts like smoke. Gale didn't speak. He moved through the bookshop like a ghost, lighting candles, pulling down volumes, filling the air with the scent of parchment and ink. The moment they'd returned, he'd gone straight to his desk. Astarion watched from the doorway, arms folded tight. "You're shaking again." "It's adrenaline," Gale said without looking up, "and excitement. This is a thread, finally a real connection between the heart engine and the earlier manifestation." Vesta blinked sleepily from her spot near the fire. Earlier manifestation meaning the cursed heart that tried to devour your soul last year. Essentially. Gale's tone was maddeningly calm. The signatures are too similar to be coincidence. The same weave pattern, twisted through mechanical focus. Someone's recreating it, refining it. Astarion stepped closer. Someone's weaponizing it. "Possibly," Gale replied shortly. "Possibly." His voice cracked like a whip. "You heard it, Gale. It spoke your name. It's already in your magic." Gale gave a small dismissive wave of his hand. "It's mimicking. Echoes often imprint on familiar frequencies." "You're not an echo," Astarion snapped. "You're the target." Vesta rose slowly, eyeing the tension between them. "All right, children, maybe—" "Not now," Astarion cut in, never taking his eyes off Gale. "You're doing it again. The same thing you did before that cursed heart nearly consumed you, hiding behind the weave, pretending you're not in danger because it makes the equations prettier." Gale finally looked up. His voice was too quiet. "I survived, didn't I?" "Barely," Astarion said, and the word was a tremor. "And only because I—" He stopped, the air between them thinned to a knife edge. "Because you what?" Gale asked. Astarion's jaw worked. "Because I wouldn't let you die." Vesta stepped back slowly, as if sensing that this argument wasn't meant for witnesses. She muttered something about checking the locks downstairs and vanished, leaving the two of them alone in the golden half-light of the shop. Gale exhaled. "You think I'm reckless." "I think you have no idea what it's like," Astarion said, voice breaking low, "to watch you disappear piece by piece while pretending it's all for knowledge. To feel that thing clawing at you through the weave and know I can't stop it." He stopped again, trembling. Gale's expression softened. "You're afraid." "I don't do afraid," Astarion hissed. "Yes, you do. You just hate that it makes you human." Gale argued. "Don't," Astarion warned, stepping forward. "Don't you dare turn this into one of your quiet lessons." "Then what should I call it?" Gale snapped back. "Call it what it is." Astarion's voice shattered through the room. "I love you, you infuriating, brilliant fool, and you're going to get yourself killed because you can't admit that being mortal means you can lose." The silence after was thunderous. Gale stood frozen, breath caught halfway. The candlelight flickered between them like a heartbeat. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Astarion." "Don't," Astarion said again, weaker now. "Don't say something clever. Don't say something safe." Gale crossed the distance between them before he could think better of it. "No," he said, "I won't." And then he kissed him. The motion was desperate, inevitable, years of restraint collapsing in an instant. Astarion met him halfway, teeth and breath and fury, all the ways passion and terror could look the same. Books slid from the desk, a candle guttered, the world narrowed to touch and breath and the warmth of being alive. When they finally broke apart, Gale's forehead rested against his. "You think I don't know I can lose," he whispered. "I've done nothing but lose." "Until now." Astarion closed his eyes, trembling. "Then don't make me watch it happen again." Gale's hand found his cheek, gentle, grounding. "Then stay," he said. Astarion's laugh was half sob, half prayer. "I never really left." They stood there, pressed between fear and forgiveness, until the world started ticking again. Faint, distant, mechanical. The heartbeat in the Undercity had returned, and this time it was keeping pace with Gale's. Chapter 13. The sound beneath the silence. The shop was still. Candlelight flickered across the scattered books, catching the slow drift of dust in the air. Astarion sat on the edge of the desk, shirt half untucked, hair disheveled, still catching his breath. Gale leaned against the opposite wall, eyes unfocused, as if he'd stepped out of a spell and wasn't quite ready to return. Between them hung a fragile, impossible calm. Vesta broke it with a throat-clearing that could have cracked marble. "So," she said, lingering in the doorway with the world's most knowing smirk, "are we finally acknowledging the thing, or do I need to start invoicing for emotional mediation?" Astarion didn't turn. "You have a remarkable talent for arriving at the least convenient possible moment." "It's a gift," she said, gliding in to reclaim her teacup. "Also, someone's pounding on the front door again. I assume it's not romance this time." Gale blinked as if surfacing from deep water. "What time is it?" "Just past noon," Vesta said. "You two have been doing your best impression of a tragic novel cover for half a day." Astarion groaned. "Oh gods. Feelings and time loss. The worst combination." The pounding came again, heavier, urgent. Vesta raised a brow. "See? Not romance." Gale straightened, smoothing his shirt and running a hand through his hair as though trying to reassemble dignity from fragments. "Let them in." Vesta opened the door. A blast of wind and rain swept in, along with Inspector Van. She looked worse than usual, hair unpinned, cloak spattered with ink and soot. The sigil on her breastplate flickered faintly, the enchantment straining. "Dekarios," she said, voice sharp but trembling. "It's happening again." Gale's eyes narrowed. "Define it." "The weave." She pushed past Vesta, slamming the door behind her. "The entire lower city's magical grid is fluctuating. Spells are misfiring, wards collapsing. Every artificer's node in the district just overloaded at once." Astarion's jaw tightened. "And you came to us because—" "Because your name's showing up in the interference pattern," Van snapped. "Every scrying circle in the Tower of Insight is lighting up with your signature. Whatever you brought up from the Undercity has found you." Gale went still. "The resonance." "Yes, and if it keeps amplifying at this rate, it'll tear through the city's weave lattice like a song stuck on repeat." Van agreed. Vesta frowned. "A song?" Van looked at her grimly. "You don't hear it?" They all fell silent. At first, there was only the rain. Then, faint through the walls, under the floorboards, came a steady rhythm. Not the random ticking of a clock, not even the heartbeat they'd heard before. A melody, low, mechanical, beautiful. Vesta's face went pale. "That's mine." Astarion turned to her sharply. "Yours." "It's the tune I wrote last week, the one I played while we were working on the case." Her voice dropped. "The heart engine's humming it." Gale's mind raced. "It's using emotional resonance, absorbing sound, memory, connection. The weave doesn't just store power, it stores meaning. It's feeding on us." "Then stop it," Van hissed. "You're the only one who understands this madness." Astarion stepped between them. "And you expect him to dive straight into it again?" "After last time," Van's eyes hardened, "I expect him to do what he always does, fix what he broke." That hit like a slap. Gale didn't flinch, but Astarion did. Vesta cut in. "Enough. All of you. We can argue later. Where's the epicenter?" "The Tower District," Van said. "The residual readings are strongest near the old Hall of Echoes." Vesta grabbed her coat. "Then that's where we're going." Astarion's voice was low. "You're not going without me." "Obviously," Vesta said, "someone has to keep him from setting himself on fire again." Gale was still staring at the floor, lost in thought. "If it's truly feeding on meaning," he murmured, "then it's learned to play us like instruments." Astarion's hand found his arm, grounding, possessive. "Then maybe it's time we change the tune." Outside, thunder rolled. Not natural, not weather, but the deep, metallic roar of something awakening beneath the city. Vesta slung her lute over her shoulder. "All right, Bloodweave Detectives," she said grimly. "Let's go stop your ex-girlfriend's weave monster before it eats Baldur's gate." Astarion smirked faintly. "You're going to have to be more specific." And with that, they stepped back into the storm. Chapter 14. The heart remembers. The Hall of Echoes had once been a cathedral to Mistra. Now it was a wound. The stained glass windows flickered with lightning, every pane showing a different reflection of Gale, each a heartbeat out of sync. The floor was a mosaic of cracked runes, pulsing blue from beneath like veins under skin. At the center hung the heart engine. It was enormous, suspended in mid-air by its own rhythm, gears turning through light instead of metal, veins of weave energy twisting around a core that looked almost organic. Each pulse sent ripples through the air, and with every ripple came a whisper. Return. The pattern. Complete the song. Gale stared, transfixed. It's the orb, he breathed. Or what's left of it. Vesta's voice trembled. I thought Mystra destroyed that thing. She did, Gale said, but Karsite magic doesn't die. It remembers, and it wants. The glow brightened, answering his words. Threads of weave light reached toward him like searching hands. Astarion grabbed his arm. Don't even think about it. It's reacting to me, Gale said. If I can stabilize it. Stabilize? Astarion's laugh was sharp. That's what you said before it almost consumed you. You think I've forgotten what it looked like when your veins glowed like that? Gale turned, eyes fever-bright. If I don't, it'll tear the city apart. And if you do, it'll tear you apart, Astarion insisted. The argument dissolved into noise as the engine screamed, an unholy note that made the stones shake. The weave shuddered, flaring through Gale's hands in wild, uncontrolled arcs. Vesta drew her lute, strumming a counterchord that steadied the vibrations. Both of you shut up and listen, she shouted. It's following the rhythm of the weave. I can pull it off key, give you an opening. Gale nodded, slipping into focus. Then on my mark, disrupt, don't destroy. Astarion swore under his breath. You're impossible. Occupational hazard, Gale said, and stepped into the circle. The weave hit him like lightning. For a heartbeat, the world dissolved into color and sound. Mystra's voice, his own arrogance, the warmth of Astarion's hand. Every regret and every joy rewritten as light. He reached deeper, trying to untangle the resonance, but the heart fought back. You are the vessel, it whispered. You are ours. Astarion couldn't watch anymore. He leapt into the circle, blade flashing crimson as he sliced through the energy strands lashing at Gale. The force threw him backward, but it broke the pattern. Vesta's song rose to fill the vacuum, a discordant hymn that turned the pulse uneven. The heart shrieked. Gale seized the moment, directing the backlash into a containment rune. The explosion was silent, a collapse of light. When it faded, the heart engine hung limp and dim, like glass after a storm. The runes on the floor cooled to amber. The only sound was breathing. Astarion was on him in a second, shaking his shoulders. You utter beautiful idiot. Gale blinked up at him, dazed. It worked. You nearly, Astarion's voice cracked. You promised me you wouldn't do this again. Gale tried to smile. You know me. I'm a poor liar. Something in Astarion broke then, fear and relief and fury tangling together. He kissed him, hard, as if to prove he was still there. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. If you ever make me watch you die again, I'll… Follow me anyway, Gale replied breathless. Astarion's laugh was raw. Exactly. Vesta cleared her throat from across the hall. I'm thrilled we're all alive and kissing, but the thing's still glowing. They turned. The heart's light was faint, almost peaceful now, but inside it something stirred. Gale felt the pulse echo in his own chest, a perfect synchrony. His expression darkened. It's not gone, he murmured. It's waiting. Astarion gripped his hand. Then we don't wait either. Vesta slung her lute over her shoulder. Right. Let's finish what Mystra started. Chapter 15. Echoes of the weave. The Hall of Echoes lay in ruin. Rain fell through holes in the roof, hissing where it struck the still warm stone. The air reeked of ozone and burnt ink. The weave's aftertaste clung to everything like dust that remembered being light. Vesta sat on a toppled column, rubbing at the blood on her sleeve. I vote, she said softly, that next time the mystery doesn't try to explode. Neither of the men answered. Astarion was crouched beside Gale, who knelt before the dim shell of the heart engine. The core no longer shone, but faint motes drifted within it, slow, rhythmic, the ghost of a heartbeat. Don't touch it, Astarion said. Please. Gale's hand hovered anyway. It's quieter now. Almost listening. Exactly why you should leave it alone. Astarion pleaded. He drew back, folding his hands as if in prayer. It's part of me. Or was. I can feel the link. That's what it wants you to think. Astarion rose, pacing. You nearly vanished inside it. Again, do you even hear yourself? Gale's voice was barely audible. I do. That's the worst part. Vesta walked over, planting herself between them. All right, we are not doing another round of who almost died for science. We're going back to the shop, eating something that isn't fear, and letting me bandage whatever the hell that burn on your arm is, wizard. He opened his mouth to argue, but the exhaustion finally caught him. Fine, he said. Just one last scan. A brief shimmer of light ran across his eyes as he murmured the detection spell. When it cleared, his face went still. It's feeding residual energy into the ley lines, he whispered. If I'd destroyed it completely, the backlash might have… Astarion cut him off with a bitter laugh. You can't even let yourself rest without turning it into a calculation. Gale looked up, guilt surfacing like a bruise. Because if I stop, someone else pays the price. That's what I learned from Waterdeep and from Mistra and now from this. And what about us? Astarion's voice cracked. Do we count as casualties or calculations? Vesta stepped in again, firm. Both of you, enough. Whatever this thing is, it's gone for now. You can flagellate yourselves later. Right now you're bleeding on my boots. They fell into uneasy silence. Rain hammered the shattered glass. The blue motes inside the heart flickered once, as though agreeing with her, then dimmed completely. They walked back from the Tower District in silence. By the time they reached the bookshop, dusk had swallowed the city. Gale went straight upstairs, muttering about notes. Astarion lingered by the counter, watching the lamplight play on the wet floorboards. Vesta closed the door, set the lock and said quietly, He's going to bury himself again, you know. I know, Astarion said. And you're going to let him. Vesta continued. He smiled without humor. You can't stop someone from hiding if they think they're protecting you. Maybe, she said, but you can knock loud enough that they remember the door's still there. Astarion looked toward the staircase, the faint light of Gale's study spilling down. For the first time since the battle, some of the steel in his posture softened. You're very good at this, Bard. It's all I'm good at, she said, keeping rhythm when the world falls apart. Upstairs, Gale sat at his desk again, a blank page before him. His hands trembled as he wrote, The fragment still lives. The weave remembers everything it loves and everything it destroys. I am both. He set the quill down, staring at the ink until the words blurred. Below, Vesta began to play. Softly, a low, steady melody that filled the shop like a heartbeat. After a while, Astarion's steps joined the sound, slow and deliberate, climbing the stairs. Gale didn't turn, but he didn't close the journal either. Maybe, he thought, the first step towards safety wasn't silence. Maybe it was letting someone else hear the song. Chapter 16. The Lesson of the Heart. The rain had softened by nightfall. The shop was half dark, firelight turning the windows to amber. Astarion stood by the window, staring at the glass. His reflection looked back at him, faint and wrong. No eyes, no face, just candlelight where a man should be. He never got used to it. He heard Gale come down the stairs long before he saw him. The wizard moved quietly, as if afraid of the creak of wood beneath his feet. I thought you'd be writing until dawn, Astarion said without turning. I tried, Gale answered, but words refused to behave. That's new, Astarion smirked. Is it? Gale smiled faintly. They tend to rebel when I lie to them. Tonight the lies are plentiful. Astarion finally turned. You mean about nearly dying again? Or the part where you pretend you're fine so that I won't worry? Gale looked away. Both. Perhaps neither. I'm still deciding which makes me the bigger fool. Silence settled, punctuated by the crackle of the fire. Astarion crossed the room slowly, the tension in his shoulders betraying the war inside him. You know, he said, I spent 2 centuries pretending, smiling, charming, saying what they wanted to hear. It keeps you alive, but it empties you out, piece by piece. By the end, I didn't even know what real felt like anymore. Gale's voice softened. And now? Now I know it's this, Astarion said, standing here, feeling like I could lose everything again if I take one wrong step. He stopped a breath away, searching Gale's face for something, permission, maybe, or courage. You make me feel human, and that terrifies me more than Cazador ever did. Gale exhaled slowly, because being human means you can be hurt. Astarion's laugh was sharp, bitter. Exactly. Gale hesitated, then said quietly, and I don't trust myself not to hurt you. Astarion frowned. You? The most self-flagellating man in the city? Gale shook his head. You don't understand. The orb, everything I did, it was because I wanted to prove my love could be power. Mistra demanded greatness, so I reached for it. I wanted to be worthy, and in doing so, I destroyed everything I loved. I can't. He stopped, throat tightening. I can't love like that again. Astarion's eyes were unreadable. You're not loving a goddess this time. You're loving a broken man who can bite back. I know. Gale smiled sadly. And somehow that makes it worse. Because if I lose you, I can't pretend it's divine punishment. It will just be me. The words hung between them, trembling. Then Astarion stepped forward, closing the distance. He reached up, touched Gale's jaw with trembling fingers. You're not the only one afraid of the mirror, he said. I look at you and see everything I could have been if I hadn't been turned into a monster. And you look at me and see everything you're terrified of becoming. Gale's breath caught. And still we keep looking. Apparently we're both idiots, Astarion said, voice barely a whisper. Yes, Gale murmured, leaning into the touch. But perhaps we're the right kind of idiots. Astarion's laugh broke, halfway between relief and sorrow. He rested his forehead against Gale's. You're impossible. So are you, whispered Gale. They stayed like that for a long time, the fire crackling low, the city humming beyond the rain. No grand declarations, no vows, just the sound of breathing, proof that they were both still here, still trying. When Vesta's footsteps creaked on the stairs above them, they didn't move apart. For once there was no need. Chapter 17. The pattern of the heart, the storm that rolled in from the sea of swords, was wrong. Not clouds, but light, tides of blue fire racing beneath the waves, reflecting off the fog like veins beneath translucent skin. Every window in Baldur's gate pulsed with the rhythm. Lamps brightened, guttered, brightened again. The weave itself was breathing. From the balcony of Dekarios and company, the view was almost beautiful. The kind of beauty that made the soul flinch. Vesta stood at the rail, rain slicking her hair to her cheeks. It's like the city's dreaming, she said. Astarion's eyes tracked the glowing lines that threaded through the cobbles. And what happens when it wakes? Inside, Gale's desk had become an altar to obsession. Scrolls, lenses, charts of ley currents scrawled over old invoices. His hands trembled as he traced the patterns. It's the heart, he said. It's not dying, it's dispersing. Every conduit that's ever carried weave energy is carrying it. The city is becoming the engine. Vesta glanced at the window again. Then the dream's turning into a body. Exactly, Gale murmured. A body that thinks. Astarion's voice sharpened. Then we stop it before it finishes the thought. There's a way, Gale said, but it's familiar. Silence, rain on glass. You mean the orb, Astarion said flatly. Gale didn't deny it. The ley lines need a living anchor to collapse safely. My channels are already scarred for it. I can draw the fragments back into myself, seal them. Astarion turned from the window, the blue light painting fire along his cheekbones. Do you hear yourself? You can't keep offering yourself to every god, ghost, and gear that hums your name. It isn't offering, Gale said quietly. It's containment. I'm the only one the pattern recognizes. It will follow its original channel if I call it back. Which ends with you glowing and collapsing in my arms again. Astarion's voice cracked on the last word. I've seen that picture already, thank you. Gale looked at him, weary and soft. If I do nothing, the whole city will wear that glow. It isn't martyrdom, Astarion, it's mathematics. Mathematics doesn't bleed. He stepped closer, furious and frightened. You think this is logic, but it's guilt. You've been carrying Mistra judgment so long, you've mistaken it for purpose. Gale opened his mouth, closed it again. You may be right. But guilt built this curse. Perhaps it can unmake it. Astarion's laugh was hollow. And when it kills you, do I bury the man or the equation? Vesta's voice came from the corner, quiet but steady. He's not wrong, Gale. If you go through with this, you need to promise it won't be just another way of disappearing. Gale's gaze flicked between them, the weight of the moment pressing down. I don't want to disappear, he said. Not from you, not from either of you. But if I walk away now, everything I've rebuilt, the books, the shop, this ridiculous life we've carved out of ashes, it all burns. Astarion caught his wrist, holding on like a man drowning. Then promise me one thing, he said. When you go in, you come back. No noble fade into light, no tragic wizard nonsense. You fight to stay. Because I can survive the city falling again, but not you. Gale's hand turned in his, fingers lacing with deliberate care. Then we both fight, he said. You keep me tethered. You always have. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The glow from the harbour threw their shadows together on the wall, one shape, indistinguishable. Vesta cleared her throat. All right, she said. Then we do this properly. I'll tune the lay tone. You two keep the rest of the world from exploding. And if any god objects, they can file a complaint in triplicate. Astarion let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh. I'm holding you to that, wizard. Gale smiled faintly. Then I have no choice but to return. And with that, they began to prepare the circle on the cliffs. The ritual on the cliffs. Dawn came like the world remembering how to glow. They stood on the cliffs above the harbour, wind tearing at their cloaks, sea spray glittering like shattered glass. Below them, the ley lines converged, blue fire threading into the surf, lighting the waves from beneath. Vesta planted her boots against the rock, tuning her lute until the strings hummed with the same pitch as the weave. Astarion drew his blade, its silver edge drinking in the light. Gale stepped to the centre of the chalk circle, the runes around him alive with his own pulse. Once it starts, he warned, don't let the song break. The first note rang out, pure, defiant, and the sky opened. Magic poured through him like molten glass. He felt every ley line, every whisper of the weave that had ever loved or feared him. His veins burned, his heart stuttered, his mind filled with voices that weren't words but memories. Mistra's laughter, the sound of Tara's wings, Astarion saying his name in the dark. You were ours, the heart breathed. You are still ours. No, he whispered, not anymore. The light around him flared, the pattern collapsing inward. Astarion ran into the circle despite the blast, caught Gale as his knees buckled, holding him upright while Vesta's music climbed higher, matching the rhythm of the city below. The cliffs shook. The sea glowed white. And then, silence. The light withdrew like a sigh. The veins beneath the harbour faded to grey. The storm broke into ordinary rain. Gale sagged against Astarion's shoulder, faint blue light pulsing just once beneath his ribs before vanishing. Astarion's voice was raw. Don't you ever do that again. Gale's smile was barely there. Then don't stop me next time. Vesta wiped her eyes, half laughing. Saints save me, you two deserve each other. Epilogue. The weave between us. Weeks passed before the city stopped listening for the heartbeat. The ley lines settled into a gentle hum. Lanterns burned steady again. In the lower city, people whispered that the weave had grown kind, that their dreams felt warmer. At Dekarios and Company, the smell of parchment and tea filled the morning air. Vesta sat by the window, finishing her new ballad. The heart that broke the sky still beats beneath our feet. We call it love because we must give it a name. And though it burns, we light our lamps from it, so the dark can never be complete. Upstairs, laughter spilled from Gale's study, Astarion complaining about ink stains on the sheets, Gale pretending to be scandalized. The sound was ordinary and miraculous all at once. Vesta smiled. That's the real spell, she said to no one, keeping the world stitched together with noise and affection. Outside, the harbour shimmered faintly at the horizon. Deep beneath, something vast shifted, no longer a threat, but not entirely gone. The weave remembered its pattern. It always did. The wind carried a last soft echo across the water. Love is the magic that refuses to die.
The city hums beneath the rain, its heart of gear still beating. We walked the line twixt love and pain, and kept the dark from meeting. Through iron dreams and candle flame, through blood and broken measure, we found the song beneath the shade, and called it love, our treasure. The heart remembers what the mind forgets, the tune that burns but never sets. Clockwork souls and mortal hands still weave the light from shifting sand. So play the song and let it mend. The heart remembers to the end. He held the weave, she sang the thread. The vampire feared the morning, but even ghosts of love long dead can wake to their own dawning. Through every lie the truth still gleams, through fear the flame still lingers. And I will play their clockwork dreams with trembling bardic fingers. The heart remembers what the mind forgets, the tune that burns but never sets. Clockwork souls and mortal hands still weave the light from shifting sand. So play the song and let it mend. The heart remembers to the end. We are the fools who face the door, made. Love is the wave that will not die, its pulse the truth beneath the sky. So play the tune and let it mend. The heart remembers in the